Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guest, thank you for inviting me. There have been some complications here for Berlin. You might have some difficulties to leave the city by plane. I did it by train, but see simply the strike as an opportunity to stay longer in a beautiful city. We don't know yet what deal will end the strike of the ground workers on Berlin's airports. But if they have this deal, they may have in mind this advice. Always look for the fool in the deal. If you don't find one, it's you. This little nugget of wisdom from the owner of the Dallas Maverick, Mark Cuban, sums up the worldview of President Donald Trump. Eat or be eaten. Never win-win, always the winner takes it all. Trump's world is a world of zero-sum games. The new US president has kicked off his tenure with a challenge to the world. The challenge is simply, from this moment, it's going to be America first. That means America challenges China. Trump has singled out China as enemy number one. As candidate, he claimed, we can't continue to allow China to rape our country. He has promised to bring back jobs China has, I quote him, stolen, and he keeps calling the country a currency manipulator. America first also challenges Europe. Trump believes that the European Union, and he is the first US president for a long time who believes that, was created for the sole purpose of beating the US at trade. When he says that more countries will exit the Union, it sounds more like a threat than a prediction. Trumponomics 101 is that. Currently, he is up against the world's largest single market. Obviously, it would rather easier to deal with Ireland and its 4.5 million people than with the 450 million people represented by the European Commission. And America first also challenges Germany. Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarra has accused Germany of exploiting the US and its European partners with grossly undervalued euro. We, in his mind, do profit from the financial crisis. That's a very unpopular truth. But we still can't dictate the ECB exchange rate policy. That's still up to Mario Draghi and the board. And there's a lot of criticism from Germany onto this board. But the Trump administration doesn't stop at public shaming. The US president has repeatedly threatened Germany's business. One example, he threatened to oppose a 35% tariff on every BMW it would be imported to the US. America first heralds US chauvinism. I call it economic unilateralism. These create new dangers to the world economy. If you leave the path of multilateral agreements that generate mutual beneficial deals, if you go for a policy of protectionism instead, you risk descent into tit for tat. The US president has given us a preview of the world in his books. What happens when Donald Trump feels that he has been screwed over? He says, I strike back, doing the same thing to them, only 10 times worse. A government document outlining the new US trade policy reads, it's time for a more aggressive approach. That's the quote. In a departure from previous policy, the Trump administration says it will ignore WTO rulings if it feels the decisions infringe US sovereignty. But what's keeping other countries from doing the same? Trade experts fear a chain reaction that ultimately unhinges our rule-based system, just like things spiral out of control. Roberto Acevedo, the head of the World Trade Organization, has warned Trump of trade wars. The effects, especially for an export-oriented country like Germany, would be devastating. So after less than 2 months in its office, it's a bitter truth, Donald Trump has increased the international insecurity. His rash style, his madman approach to politics are dangerous, especially when mixed with vital national interest. While Trump is taking verbal shots at China, his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, is sure that the US will go to war with China in the South Chinese Sea within the next 10 years. They don't call them trade wars for nothing. There is a slippery slope from trade wars to real wars. So, what's the antidote to trade wars? I was born in Bremen. In the Hanseatic city, we have long known the benefits of trades. We have known globalization, Rupert Scholz was talking on, before even there was capitalism. But we also know only fair trade is free trade. That might sound familiar for some of you that listened to Donald Trump speaking at the Congress last week. He said, I believe strongly in free trade, but it has also be fair trade. Though when Trump says fair trade, he means America first. To him, it's only fair if America wins. And in a zero-sum game, that means someone got to lose. Who? I'm sure it's developing and emerging countries are the losers in Trump's economic unilateralism. They cannot face up to the United States by themselves. Just look what's happening to Mexico. To be fair, though, trade was and is still unfair, even before Trump. We see a continuing stalemate at the WTO. Trade agreements like TTIP and CETA were never fair. And finally, your very own consumer habits have made matters worse. Take the European policies. Take the example of fishing industry. If the Europeans fish up the coast of Senegal with subsidized vessels, no wonder the Senegalese are forced to leave their homes. It's simply a matter of economic survival for them. Or take the subsidies for European agricultural exports to Africa. Cheap European chicken is destroying local agribusiness. Tomatoes from Ghana can't compete with the cheap vegetables the Europeans dump on the African market. And as a result, we export agricultural products, but hunger is spreading. we must assume our own responsibility in upholding free and fair trades. This is the counter picture of the policy of protectionism. The prospects for developing countries will go under the conditions of protectionism from bad to worse. So, how do we work toward making trade both free and fair? My answer, and I think the right answer, is global governance, good global governance. We need global rules to shape globalization, socially and ecologically. And if we talk about sovereignty, and you talk about shaping globalization, you have to understand and to learn, and that's a different to Rupert Scholz from my point, that is not national sovereignty. If we talk about global markets, global financial industry, real sovereignty lies in the ability of the international community to cooperate and re-regulate. I give you some examples. One example is fight global tax havens. Everyone is convinced on that this is right. But today's global inequality is unprecedented. It can be expressed in a single number, 8. That's how many billionaires own as much as the poorer half of the world's population. 8 men. That's it. A world like this will never be fair or secure. For more equality, we must shut down global tax havens. That means the tax havens for soccer players like Messi, Ronaldo, and Özil in Panama. But it also means the tax havens for companies and holdings. Maybe Apple on Ireland, and it's easy for many Europeans to stick to US companies in Europe. But if you stick to one, 4 fingers stick to yourself. It's also tax havens for Volkswagen in Belgium, for IKEA in the Netherlands, for BASF in Malta. And the tax havens here in Germany for the assets and inheritance of our own oligarchs. They call themselves family businesses. We need internationally binding rules against tax evasion. I give you another example, counter deregulation. Trump has promised to drain the swamp. On every rally, this was a drain the swamp. Now the swamp is raining the US. The New Yorker has put it, Trump went from drain the swamp to government sacks. He stocked his cabinet with Wall Street billionaires and millionaires. Together, they are rolling back the safeguards put in place by the former administration in response to the financial crisis. They impede the work of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which seeks to protect the interests of ordinary Americans, house owners and others, and investors. They reduce the requirements for the capital reserves of big banks. The big advantage the US regulation have organized compared to Europe. They were tougher on that, than the Europeans. And they got the Dodd-Frank Act against the Wall Street excesses. The American rollback could trigger a deregulation race to the bottom. The consequence, next financial crisis is looming at the horizon. That mustn't happen. We must push back before it's too late. It's time to re-regulate the financial globalization. Third example, divest from fossil fuels and invest in clean energy. The G20 members subsidize fossil fuels with $444 billion every year. These are subsidies for the rich. As former Mexican President Felipe Calderon says. We have to stop it. This is on the agenda on the next G20 meeting here in Hamburg. Ecology equals justice. The Paris Agreement has pointed out a huge deficit when it comes to investing in green finance, in environmentally friendly infrastructure and energy supply. If we want to achieve the climate goals, we have to change the course. And the course is described by the last G7 meeting in Germany under the issue of decarbonization. Decarbonization, for decarbonization, we have to phase out fossil subsidies. But we will not succeed in decreasing environmental harmful fossil subsidies if we don't do our homework also here in Germany. Fossil subsidies add to up over 50 billion euros annually, according to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. 50 billion UBA. It's not a figure of the Green Party. It's a figure by the German government. 3 examples for that. Germany's full taxation system leads to 8 billion subsidies annually for diesel vehicle drivers. You know diesel? These are the Volkswagen, you know? And not only that. As long as this system works, e-mobility will have no chance on the market. Germany's car industry and the connected industry like Bosch, for example, is trailing Japanese, Chinese, and US car manufacturers. We are 10 years behind. Second example. In times where China invests billions in renewable energies, China last year invested more than the Europeans and the US in a sum. And in the same time, they cut 100 coal-fired power plants. Chancellor Merkel pays 1.6 billion euros to Vattenfall and RWE, these are our power suppliers, 2 of our 4 big ones, to hold on the 20 oldest coal power plants. But I'm sure that within 2 years there will be a broad consensus for phasing out coal mining and burning in Germany. The phase-out consensus for nuclear will be the pattern for that. Third example. Fuel taxation excludes fuel for non-energetic use. Germany's taxpayers have to pay fuel tax for every kilometer they drive and every kilowatt hour they use. But the government subsidized the chemical industry with more than €1 billion annually. At the same time, the price for oil and gas was halved. And we passed the chance for cutting the subsidies in this situation without any costs for the industry. What we need is an investment from fossil fuels and massive green investments. At the end, we have to paint another picture. We have a lot to do. And this is something different, like the concept of protectionism and trade wars. Donald Trump's like to propagate the lone wolf myth. As he put it at the Republican National Convention last year, I alone can fix it. But that's not true. Not in business, certainly not in the world. Entrepreneurs need partners, and nations need partners. In the past, we have counted a strong transatlantic relations to set global rules. However, Trump might not guarantee a multilateral world order, so it's time we forge alliances that will help rein in globalization. These days, that leads to strange bedfellows. We find ourselves fighting for a rule-based market alongside China. Ironic, isn't it? As the largest creditor for the US, China has a massive interest in regulating the financial market. Recently, China has also been fighting coal more jealously like Germany. And while the Grand Coalition had invested these 1.6 billion, they cut 100 power plants. However, when it comes to combating global inequality, China is a complicated partner. China's income inequality is among the world's worst. Chinese elites have been implicated in offshore tax havens. As a result, coverage of the Panama leaks was limited in China. All the while, the country has tightened its grip around civil society. Like I said, strange bedfellows, actual. In this brave new world, we need to forge an alliances where it's possible. But alliances will only work if we lead by example. Leading by example means that we have to strengthen the European Union, that we have to do our homework on re-regulating financial industry, cutting fossil subsidies here at home, and finding alliances with those partners in the world who want to organize free trade under better global governance. This is the alternative to a world of trade wars that will, for sure, lead to real wars. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. If you allow us, yes, to take a few questions of our audience. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay. So thank you for your speech. When we talk about global governance and about developing branches such as the job market, we look at genetic engineering, artificial intelligence. So soon we'll have robots doing our jobs. How do you see global governance in that case? Do you think of a universal income, basic income, or where's the answer to that in global governance?
I'm not convinced that there will be a whole substitution of human work done by digitalization, but the truth is, and the danger is in many cases, that the ongoing process of automatization will have a new turn by that what we call digitalization 4.0, and at that case. I think the open question for a lot of countries is to create under the conditions of globalization sustainable, and that means in many cases local and regional growth. So this contradiction is the real thing. And I think, yeah, you will not stop the digitalization. You won't. And what we have to organize is forms of new ideas of distributing income and distributing work. Because work is still, and that is my doubt on the basic income system, work for many people is the way of participation within society. In most societies, that's the truth. So the ideas of shortening working times and others, and this is contradiction to the actual tendencies. Actually, the working hours are becoming longer and longer for many people. Maybe an idea that will fit more to the challenges of digitalization and automatization than the idea of a basic income. I'm not responsible for the microphone. Yeah, please, go on.
First of all, I want to appreciate what you've given us. I'm Member of Parliament from Uganda. I'm a former Minister of Health. I've been a legislator for the last 20 years. Of course, there is a saying that where two elephants fight, the grass suffers. What could be the fate of the African developing countries between the wars between China and America? What is your prediction? What is your comment?
My prediction would be that we need, from a European point of view, a better cooperation. Better cooperation means we have to change our attitude to Africa. For a long time, African, even by the good-willing guys in Germany, not the racists, the good-willing guys was more or less we should help them. That's wrong. They can help themselves. We have to organize forms of a level playing fields to open our markets. And to open our markets, it's not only markets for goods, it's only markets for services and markets for work. So this form of creating a good neighborhood between Europe and Africa is a concept where, under the conditions of an ongoing fight of the big elephants, can be an answer. I will add a second and third thought to that. Yesterday, as the foreign minister of Germany visited Russia, the Russian foreign minister repeated his view on his post-West world order. I don't like the word of the West. I would stick to the universal values of human rights. That's not a question of the West. It's also taking place all over the world and should place all that. This is not my problem. But he had also said this is a multipolar world. Yes. And that means that there are not only two elephants in the room. We have to look. What are the interests of such large countries and large democracies like Brazil, like India, like the Republic of South Africa? And to find a way to better organize these multipolar world in a multilateral way. This is the answer of confronting between the elephants and destroying the grass. Sarah Schreiber.
Okay. So please, if we can express our sincere gratitude, we have to conclude now. But thank you again so much. Thank you.